The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. sharp, a sound that cut through the quiet of my bedroom like broken glass. I had always dreaded late-night calls. They never bring good news. My name is Margaret Turner, though most people call me Maggie. I am 56 years old, a single mother, and that night became the moment my life split into a before and an after. I remember fumbling for the receiver, my hands clumsy with sleep and fear. A voice I did not recognize spoke quickly, each word heavy. "Mrs. Turner, this is Massachusetts General Hospital. Your mother, Eleanor, suffered a massive stroke in her home earlier tonight. We did everything we could. I am sorry to tell you, she passed at 1:50 a.m. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, the receiver pressed to my ear. My mother was gone. We had not spoken much in the past few years, and the thought of her leaving this world without a final word between us was like a weight crushing my chest. I did not think. I pulled on the first coat, within reach, the old beige wool one I had owned for years, and drove through the empty Boston streets in my nightgown. My daughter, Sophie, slept upstairs, and I whispered a quick promise to myself not to wake her until I had answers. The hospital lights were blinding as I hurried inside. The doctor's expression told me everything before his words did. Eleanor was gone. They spoke of paperwork, of arrangements, of what would come next, but my mind clung only to what had ended. A few hours later, my brother David arrived with his wife, Charlotte. David's face was pale, his shoulders bowed, grief making him look 10 years older. But Charlotte, she swept in with perfect hair and flawless nails, her heels clicking against the tile. She wore oversized sunglasses, though the morning sky outside was gray. She wept, yes, but her tears felt measured. Her hands squeezed mine for display, more than comfort. When no one watched, her fingers slackened, her face smoothed into something colder. I noticed what others did not. Charlotte's eyes scanned the waiting room, not the clock, not the floor, but the man sitting 2 chairs away. He wore a sleek suit, and though I did not know him then, I would later learn his name was Victor Lang. Their brief glance, their hushed exchange, carved a suspicion deep into me. As dawn broke, I sat alone in the lobby. My mother had been a complicated woman, strong, sharp, and often distant. She had favored David in ways that left old scars on me. Yet she had left me a pendant years ago with a single word engraved inside: faith. I clutched it now, trembling. I did not yet know what Eleanor had planned in her final months, only that her absence had left me with a storm I could feel but not see. The day of my mother's funeral came with a cold drizzle, the kind that seeps through coats and umbrellas, as if the sky itself wept for Eleanor. Boston's old stone church stood solemn against the gray, its bells tolling low. I stood at the entrance, clutching that pendant she had once given me, feeling the weight of unfinished words. Inside, the pews filled quickly. Neighbors, distant relatives, people I hadn't seen in years all gathered. My daughter Sophie slipped her hand into mine. She was only 16, too young to carry the heaviness of loss, but she sensed it all the same. Her wide brown eyes scanned the crowd, then turned up to me. "Mom," she whispered, "why does Aunt Charlotte keep whispering to that man by the door? Isn't she supposed to be sad?" I followed Sophie's gaze. Charlotte, dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair styled in perfect waves that did not move in the damp air, was leaning in close to the same suited man I had noticed in the hospital. His umbrella dripped onto the stone floor as he spoke quietly to her. They weren't mourning. They were plotting. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," I murmured, squeezing Sophie's hand. "Just stay close to me." The service unfolded with hymns and eulogies that painted Eleanor as a pillar of strength, a woman of vision. I wanted to believe all of it, but grief and memory tangled together. My mother had been many things: respected, admired, yes, but also guarded, and often hard. I thought of the arguments we had left unresolved, the years of silence between us. Yet I also thought of the pendant she gave me, and how she had pressed it into my hand with unusual gentleness. After the burial, as mourners drifted away beneath umbrellas, the family attorney, Mr. Hughes, approached me. He was an old man with kind eyes, his suit damp from the rain. "Maggie," he said softly, "your mother left something for you. She asked that you receive it privately after the service." He pressed a sealed envelope into my hand. My fingers shook as I slipped it into my coat pocket, the paper warm from his grasp. Later that evening, when Sophie had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. I broke the seal carefully, as though the paper might shatter. Inside was a single letter. Eleanor's handwriting slanted and familiar. "Maggie," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I could not tell you myself. I have placed everything, our homes, the plaza, the accounts, in your name. Not David's, not Charlotte's. Yours. Do not announce it. Do not argue. Charlotte's eyes are on the money more than on family. David is blind in his devotion. Guard Sophie's future. Guard yourself. Stay silent. Stay steady. The paperwork will shield you. Patience will be your weapon." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My mother, who had often been so distant, had seen farther than I ever imagined. The next morning, the sky over Boston was a flat gray, the kind that pressed low and heavy on the city. David insisted on driving us to the attorney's office. The car ride was silent, except for the windshield wipers. Sophie sat beside me in the back, her earbuds in, though I knew she wasn't listening to music. She could feel the tension. Charlotte sat in the front seat, scrolling on her phone, sighing loudly at traffic, as if grief itself had inconvenienced her. Her perfume filled the small space, sharp and artificial. I kept my eyes on the raindrops racing down the glass, one hand wrapped tightly around Eleanor's pendant. The law office smelled faintly of leather and old books. Mr. Hughes greeted us with a firm nod, and you gestured toward the polished oak table, where documents were stacked neatly in a folder. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Whitman, dated 3 months prior to her passing." His voice was measured, practiced. My heart pounded. I remembered the letter, her words urging me to stay silent, to stay steady. Mr. Hughes began to read. "To my beloved daughter Margaret Turner, I leave all 14 rental properties under the Whitman portfolio, the Whitman Plaza located on Hanover Street, and the entirety of my investment accounts." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. David's head jerked up. "What?" His voice cracked, disbelief etched across his face. Charlotte's sunglasses slid down her nose, her eyes flashing with fury. "That's absurd," she snapped. "We've lived in one of those houses for years. David is her only son. He deserves his share. This must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Hughes replied calmly. "Your mother was meticulous. Everything was notarized and witnessed properly." David turned to me, his face pale. "Mom never said anything. Why didn't she tell me?" I wanted to speak, to explain the letter, the fears Eleanor had spelled out, but her words echoed in my mind. "Do not argue. Do not explain." So I folded my hands in my lap and stayed silent. My calmness unsettled Charlotte more than any defense could. She shifted in her seat, her mouth twisting with anger. Hughes continued, "To my son, David Whitman, I leave my personal library and my collection of woodworking tools. May they remind him of the value of knowledge and of building with his own hands." David's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, shame flickering across his grief. Charlotte nearly leapt to her feet. "Books and tools, while she gets millions in property and stocks? No, this will not stand. We will contest this." Hughes placed his palms flat on the table. "You are free to contest, Mrs. Whitman, but the court will see Eleanor's intent clearly." Charlotte turned her glare on me, her voice dripping venom. "You think you've won, don't you, Maggie? Sitting there so smug, letting her hand you everything. But this isn't over." I met her stare, unblinking, and I said nothing. A week after the will reading, Charlotte appeared at my front door without calling ahead. She wore a tailored coat, belted tightly at the waist, her glossy leather handbag tucked under her arm. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Margaret," she said sweetly, I thought it would be nice for us to talk. Just the two of us. May I come in? Politeness kept me from closing the door. I stepped aside, motioning her into the kitchen. The same kitchen where Sophie and I shared late-night cocoa and whispered conversations. Charlotte sat at the table, like she owned it, crossing her legs neatly, her nails clicking against the wood. I put the kettle on. The hiss of steam filled the silence between us. I know things have been tense since the will, Charlotte began, her tone syrupy. But we're family. We should keep the peace. David is devastated. Sophie must be confused. And you, Maggie, you've got so much on your shoulders. 14 houses, a plaza, investments. It's a lot for one woman, especially at your age. She tilted her head as if sympathizing, but her eyes glittered. I poured her a cup of tea, my movements slow, deliberate. What are you suggesting? I asked quietly. She leaned forward. Why not transfer some of the properties into David's name? Or sell a few, put the money into a joint account. That way no one feels left out. It would keep harmony in the family. I stirred my tea, the spoon circling without sound. Eleanor made her choices, I said softly. Her mask cracked. You're being unreasonable. Do you want to tear this family apart? Michael's hurting, and you're clinging to paper. I set my spoon down, folded my hands. No, Charlotte, I'm not tearing this family apart. You are. Her nostrils flared. For a moment, raw anger burned in her face, but she smoothed it over with a quick sip of tea. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. You may think you've won, Maggie, but you can't keep control forever. David is my husband. Sophie is just a child. You can't cut me out. I remained seated, calm, my silence thicker than any argument. When she finally stormed out, heels clicking hard against the floorboards, I let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands trembled as I cleared the cups, placing them in the sink. Then I opened the drawer by the telephone stand and pulled out a plain notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date. Charlotte came to the house, pressured me to sign over assets, appealed to family unity, grew angry when I refused, left with veiled threats. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. Stay silent, stay steady. The paperwork will shield you. Patience will be your weapon. That night, Sophie admitted she had overheard Charlotte on the phone. She was talking about moving everything to Florida with that man, Victor, Sophie whispered. Florida, Victor. The storm was gathering, and I knew it had only begun. 2 days later, I received a call from Mr. Hughes, my mother's attorney. His steady voice carried a weight that made my stomach tighten. Maggie, he said, I think it's time you see something your mother left behind. She asked me not to burden you while she was alive, but now it may protect you. I met him the following morning in his office. The blinds were drawn against the pale winter light. He unlocked a cabinet and pulled out a thick manila folder, setting it gently on the desk between us. Your mother suspected things about Charlotte, he explained. She hired a private investigator 3 months before her death. These are the findings. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The first photographs were stark. Charlotte stepping out of a hotel lobby at night. Victor Lang's arm snug around her waist. Another showed them seated close in a corner booth at a restaurant, their heads bent together in intimacy that spoke louder than any words. I flipped through each image, my chest tightening. Some were grainy, captured from a distance, but the truth was undeniable. My sister-in-law had betrayed David. But worse than the photographs were the printed transcripts Hughes slid across the desk. These were legally retrieved from a discarded phone. He said, I forced myself to read. Victor, he'll never see it coming. The woman is blind with loyalty. Charlotte, David nods to whatever I say. He's easy. But the daughter, she's a burden. I'll get her out of the way once the estate is secured. Victor, how? Charlotte, boarding school. Or better yet, leave her with Maggie. Sophie slows me down. Dead weight, dead weight. She was speaking about my daughter. My heart clenched so sharply I had to grip the edge of the desk. Sophie, my bright, resilient girl who still believed in Saturday pancakes and bedtime stories, was nothing but an obstacle to Charlotte. Tears blurred my vision. I closed the folder, pressing a hand to my chest to steady my breath. "Maggie," Hughes said gently, "this is why Eleanor transferred everything to you. She feared Charlotte's intentions. She saw what David refused to see, and she trusted you to carry the responsibility." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, but my voice came steady. "Then I will. I'll protect Sophie. I'll protect everything my mother built. I won't let Charlotte tear it apart." Hughes nodded, sliding the folder back toward me. "Keep this safe. The time will come when it must be shown. Until then, document everything. Silence and patience, just as your mother instructed." That night, back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, long after Sophie had gone to bed. The photographs and transcripts lay before me, heavy with truth. My grief for Eleanor tangled with rage and resolve. Charlotte thought I was weak, a widow clinging to scraps, but she did not know the strength that grows in silence. It didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, a crisp white envelope arrived at my door, delivered by courier. Inside was a petition filed in Suffolk County Family Court. Charlotte was suing me. The language cut like glass. "Margaret Turner, an emotionally unstable widow, is unfit to manage a multi-million-dollar estate. Her actions are selfish and detrimental to her daughter Sophie, and to the family as a whole." I sat at the kitchen table, with the papers spread out before me. Sophie hovered nearby, her face pale. "Mom," she whispered, "what does this mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that your aunt wants to take everything away from us, but we're not going to let her." Mr. Hughes reassured me we were ready. "This is exactly what Eleanor anticipated," he said. "We'll present the evidence, and Charlotte's performance won't survive scrutiny." The courthouse loomed gray and imposing on the morning of the hearing. Inside, the ceiling stretched high, voices echoing even when hushed. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back, Eleanor's pendant tucked under the neckline like a shield. Sophie squeezed my hand before we entered the courtroom. Charlotte was already seated at the petitioner's table. She wore a fitted black suit, her suit, her lipstick sharp red, her posture immaculate. Beside her sat Victor, whispering in her ear, as though he belonged there. David slumped next to her, hollow-eyed, a man caught in the undertow of loyalty and blindness. Charlotte's attorney stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is about fairness. My client, Mrs. Charlotte Whitman, seeks what is rightfully hers and her husband's. Mrs. Turner has wrongfully seized control of properties and investments far beyond her capacity. The assets must be redistributed." Charlotte dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a grieving, misunderstood wife. She leaned her head delicately on David's shoulder, whispering theatrically, as though the judge couldn't see the act. Then Hughes rose. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, this case is not about fairness, it is about foresight. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman meticulously transferred her estate to her daughter Margaret because she foresaw what we are witnessing today. She feared Charlotte's ambition. And she was right." He handed the judge the folder, photographs of Charlotte with Victor, transcripts of her messages. The judge flipped through, her brow tightening. Charlotte stiffened. Her fingers gripped her tissue until it shredded. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge called Sophie to the stand. My daughter walked forward, so small in that vast room, her school sweater too big for her shoulders. She clutched the pendant I had lent her for courage. The bailiff swore her in gently. Sophie's voice trembled at first, then steadied. "Sometimes Aunt Charlotte forgets to pick me up from school. Sometimes she forgets my inhaler. But my mom never forgets. She always comes. She always remembers." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward. "And," Sophie added, her eyes finding mine, "I don't want to move to Florida with Aunt Charlotte. I want to stay here. I want to stay with my mom." Charlotte's mask cracked. David buried his face in his hands. The truth, spoken through a child, cut sharper than any lawyer's words. The final hearing came 2 weeks later, on a morning that could not decide between rain and sun. I walked into the courthouse with Sophie beside me, her hand gripping mine. She was nervous, but her chin was lifted. Braver than most adults I knew, I wore Eleanor's pendant again, its weight steady against my chest. Charlotte arrived minutes later. She wore a bright red dress, bold and defiant, as though daring the court to see her power. Victor trailed behind her, no longer bothering with discretion. Their whispers and glances carried across the hall. David followed last, shoulders hunched, looking years older. When the judge entered, the room settled. Charlotte's attorney rose, speaking with a polished confidence. "Your Honor, my client only seeks balance. Mrs. Turner has clung to assets beyond her ability. A child belongs with her mother's family. That is the natural order." Charlotte dabbed her eyes again, performing her role to perfection. She placed a hand delicately on David's arm, as if reminding everyone she was the loyal wife, the wounded woman. Then Hughes stood. His voice was low, but carried with precision. "Your Honor, appearances can deceive. This case is not about natural order. It is about intent and protection. Eleanor Whitman did not disinherit her son by accident. She did so because she foresaw what we now see clearly." He handed the judge a thick binder. Inside were photographs of Charlotte and Victor leaving hotels, the transcripts of their messages, and her words calling Sophie a burden and dead weight. The judge's face hardened. As she turned each page, she tapped her gavel once. "Mrs. Whitman," she said, looking directly at Charlotte, "do you deny this relationship with Mr. Lang?" Charlotte froze. Her eyes darted to Victor, but he avoided her gaze. He shifted back in his seat, unwilling to speak. David sat stiffly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His eyes flicked from his wife to me. For the first time in months, his gaze met mine fully, and I saw devastation there, but also recognition. Charlotte stammered, "Those photos are fabricated. My mother-in-law set me up. The judge cut her off. "Enough. The evidence is dated, verified, and corroborated. Your denials hold no weight." The ruling came swiftly. Custody of Sophie Turner remains with her mother, Margaret Turner. Mrs. Whitman will have supervised visitation only. The estate will remain as designated by Eleanor Whitman's will. Her foresight was justified. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder in my chest. Charlotte shot to her feet, her face twisted with rage. "This is a sham. You're ruining my life." She grabbed David's arm. "Say something. Don't just sit there." But David pulled away. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You lied to me. About everything." Victor rose and touched Charlotte's elbow. "Come on," he muttered. "It's over." He guided her out, her fury spilling in broken words, her heels clattering across the marble floor until the sound disappeared. The room fell quiet. Sophie tugged at my sleeve, whispering, "Mom, does this mean we're safe now?" I knelt, hugging her tightly. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, tears streaming down my face. "We're safe." 3 years passed in what felt like a single breath, yet each day carried its own weight. Life did not return to what it had been before, but it found a rhythm that was steady, healing. Sophie grew taller, her voice deeper with confidence, her smile still bright and unguarded. The shadows of the courtroom faded into memories, replaced by the simple rituals of pancakes on Saturday mornings, evenings spent at the kitchen table, and laughter echoing through a home that finally felt safe. The properties my mother had left became more than numbers on paper. I managed them carefully, learning each tenant's name, listening to their concerns, fixing what needed fixing. The shopping plaza thrived again under patient attention. Each decision I made carried Eleanor's echo, as though she had trained me without words. For years I had doubted whether she ever truly saw me. Now, through the responsibility she entrusted to me, I knew she always had. One spring evening, I sat in the front row of Sophie's college theater performance. The auditorium lights dimmed, the audience hushed, and the red curtain lifted. There she was, my daughter, center stage, her lines strong and clear. My heart swelled so large it felt it might burst. When the play ended, applause thundered. I clapped until my palms ached, tears blurring my vision. Sophie bowed, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. That grin, half proud, half relieved, was the same one she had given me years ago in the courtroom, when she spoke her truth. Afterward, she rushed to me, her script clutched tightly in her hand. "Mom, did I do okay?" she asked, breathless. I opened the script to find a note written inside the cover in her messy handwriting. "Mom, thank you for protecting me. I love you." The words stopped me cold. For a moment, I was not standing in a college hallway, but back in my mother's kitchen, finding Eleanor's letter. Different handwriting, same message. My mother had written, "Stay steady. Guard Sophie's future." And now Sophie wrote to me, "I love you." The circle had closed. That night at home, I sat in my armchair. On the table beside me lay Eleanor's pendant and Sophie's script. One carried the echoes of the past, the other the hope of the future. Together they told me what mattered most: love that protects, love that heals, love that endures. I thought of everything I had learned. Silence, once something I feared, had become my strength. Patience had been my weapon. And steady love, though not loud, had been my shield. I want to tell anyone who has ever been underestimated this: strength is not always in raising your voice. Sometimes it is in choosing not to. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the quiet choices you make, through the dignity you refuse to surrender. As I turned off the light, Sophie's voice floated down from her room. "Good night, Mom. I love you." And I whispered back, steady and certain, "I love you too, always."